Do you know what? This is why it's all about going back to the reality with no name. One of the most amazing Sufis was a woman called Rabia Al Basra, who was like the preeminent female Sufi. I mean, she once said, if I worship you for fear of hell, cast me in hell. And she spent so much time and she was so immersed in this. Off the top of my head, are there female Sufis? Not that any that I've come across. As a matter of fact, no, I've come across one, but she'll never teach. She's kind of got to the point where she's at 15, 16 hours a day sitting in seclusion and still feels she's complicating the matter. The thing with Sufism is Sufis are around you everywhere. They pervade your popular culture. They're absolutely everything. I'm the complicated version of it because I do the talks and all of this stuff. They're serving you food. They're everywhere. If you know what to look for, they'll betray themselves. They will always leave a little clue for somebody. So, for example, I was invited to some self-help meeting and a guy walks in, and as he walks in, he goes like that and he's got a ring on his finger. And that flash of the ring, I knew straight away this guy knew something. So as we're talking, it transpires that he spent time in Konya and had this deep spiritual experience at Rumi's mausoleum and came back completely changed. And he practiced a method called Ruqya, which is in a sense of spiritual cleansing. So he comes along to a talk and it was brilliant because the talks were normally busy. On that one night, it's just him and me. And he walks in and he lights a candle and he puts it down on the mantelpiece and he goes, I'm strong. And I just went, no doubt. And he goes, what's your ruqya? And well, my ruqya are my words. And then we just went silent. But the thing is, if you know what to look for, these people are everywhere. But it's whether you're going to look. Observation is massive. Sometimes we're here, we want to hear something, observe. There's more, psychology says 80% of communication is nonverbal. So don't worry about what the guy's saying. What's he not saying? And then take it one level further. Don't worry about even his form. What's he actually pointing to? So what am I going on about? Why am I coming out with irrelevancies? Why am I not even doing the classical talk of Sufism saying, oh yes, Khwaja Ajmer Sharif came through. So Khwaja Ajmer, he came, he went over the Silk Road, he came to India and he had this Vakya where this happened and that. What will you get from that? You'll get a story, you'll feel good. But what does that story actually point to? So the thing is, it's all about pointing. Where am I actually going with this? Why am I moving my hands like this? Why have I decided, after talking up and down the country for 3 years, that today I'm going to come to the Isle of Man and I'm going to dress like this? What could I possibly be making a statement about? Because I'm dressed like this. So we were expecting a certain thing. We were expecting him to maybe say, Jisne apne aap ko pachana, usne apne Rabb ko pachana, which means he who recognizes his self recognizes his Lord. So we expect him maybe a bit of Punjabi, maybe a bit of Urdu, but he's kind of poking fun. But at the same time, he's deadly serious. What could it mean? So that's why I said it's a question. What could I possibly be doing sitting here? Which is why kind of in a sense, Mike kind of said, well, we've had our little kind of conversations in the past, let's bring this guy on. Because I started off in the whole Sufi thing, then got known as a bit of a non-duality guy, and then kind of found my way back to Sufism. But then the thing is, it was like not Sufism in the way I'd been taught it. Taught it as in, we have a lineage, we come from this lineage, and we are this school, and our school's better than your school, and your school is better than my school, and we will, but we do zikr. So it was like, okay, well, that's really cool. But how does that help me on my day-to-day existence? How does it help me when the cat headbutts me at 5 o'clock in the morning and goes, feed me? Or the missus is having a bad day, or, some company CEO turns up and kind of goes, well, this is all very well, and you're telling me a story, but how does that affect my bottom line? So it's always about being practical. As I say, if I was in India or Pakistan, the questions I would probably be getting are, my milk, my cow's not giving me enough milk. So we're social workers, because out there you'll see teachers will kind of try to identify the actual problem, because sometimes with the whole thing about realization, we use it as a blanket. We kind of go, my life's messed up, I've heard about this thing called realization or enlightenment or Sufism, and I'll learn about that. That may not be what you actually need. And a real life example of that is I had a man come to, and he still comes to the London talks, for about 8 months, this guy is telling me he wants to wake up. One day in a moment of vulnerability, the actual issue comes out, I've got money issues. Right, now we can start. So the whole reason for throwing this stuff out is it's going to be a general talk, because guess what? There's 30, 40 people in the room. I've got to be aware of the fact that there's all so many different stories going on. So something general happens. Somewhere along the line, there's an invitation here for someone who kind of goes, okay, I want to take it further. The teacher of Rumi was a man called Shams Tabriz. And Shams Tabriz spent his entire life going up and down the Silk Road, the Middle East, everything, trying to find that one person. So what happens is he gets to a marketplace and he sees Rumi. So he grabs the reins of his horse and he asks him the question. And the reason we all know about Rumi is because he asks the question. Rumi gets off his horse and goes, this is no ordinary person I'm speaking to. And the question he asks, he kind of goes, well, the Prophet Muhammad always used to say, forgive me. He goes, whereas there's a very famous Sufi called Bayezid Bastami who in a state of ecstasy said, behold my glory, under my cloak there is nothing but God. And he goes, but so he was obviously past the Prophet. And Rumi kind of went, hold on. The respect for the question was such that he came off his horse and he kind of went, this is no ordinary person. So what happens is he answers the question and Rumi, Shams Tabriz realizes this is the one I've been looking for. Now for the next 40 days, some people say the love affair that happens between them to the point where there is no, as Nathan said so beautifully in this talk earlier, there is no subject and object. One cannot recognize the teacher, one cannot recognize the student. It's such, that this beautiful classic called the Masnavi comes out. But like every great teacher then, Shams gets to the point where he realizes that he has now become an obstruction. So he realizes I can't now talk to him. So there will come a point when you're on the journey and if you have a teacher that they'll realize that they can't talk to you now because you're now talking to yourself. The internal journey has started. So Shams, according to some popular legends, he was murdered by the students of Rumi because they were jealous because Rumi had been known as Sultan of Ulama, which basically meant the king of scholars. So he was very literal and very dry. He had the book knowledge. And then overnight he starts talking about whirling and wine and going to the tavern and getting drunk and I fell in love and kissed me and things like this. And they're thinking, this is too much of a movement here. Some say that they killed him. Another rumor is that Shams Tabriz realized what was going on and disappeared. To this day, nobody knows where Shams's grave is. There's places where people think it may be. And there's other Sufis who've got the same name. But the whole thing is to kind of, in a sense, start that love affair, where there is a lover and there's a beloved. And then there is just a beloved. But there is still some semblance of someone who can recognize there is a beloved. And then there is no lover and there's no beloved. The drop of water has hit the ocean, it has no sense of itself. So it's gone through something called fana, which is an annihilation of self. Within that, there's more. But then if you're here, then ultimately it settles into something called baqa billah, which is basically permanence. We say permanence with Allah, but it can be permanence with what is, permanence with consciousness, where we see that it's illusory. Of course, the world is illusory. But as the Sufis say, granted the world is an illusion, but we still have to live in it, which then we have to kind of, in a sense, become very practical. Then this kind of stuff starts happening. So if somebody turns up and goes, my cow's not giving enough milk, it's going to be hard talking about this or that. I mean, I live in Manchester. And what I found is since I've gone down there, I had this impression of Manchester being this amazing city, it's party. There's a lot of broken people. So I've got this kid who, wants to talk to me. What do I do then? But that's where you have to be live. You have to be in that moment with that because you know that you may say something wrong. So sometimes it can be, yeah, bro, I'll tell you what, you want to go for pizza? But at the same time, you could be in another mehfil, which is a gathering, and we're talking wide, expansive concepts. So you're just there. You're just always here, there, whichever, what I was saying. You're just there, you're always in that moment. And you're just looking and saying, well, what happened? So I'm kind of talking, but I'm also observing. But I'm also listening, because I want to know where this goes, because I'm following a trail. So the trail is like, okay, we'll talk about following the trail now. Now do this, because it really has nothing to do with me. It's impersonal to me. There's just a body here, it speaks, it comes out with stuff, it tells some jokes, it's irreverent, and then sometimes it becomes very, very divine. Even right now, I'm kind of thinking, okay, running out of things to say. This should be cool. Where do we go next with this? So maybe it's silence, or maybe it's like, okay, shuffle some paper around, tell a few things. Damn, I should have written some notes. So that's the way it goes. Because sometimes there's silence there. And sometimes it's like you're talking 10 to the dozen, and you're looking to drag the guy through a bush backwards and just crash everything he knows about this, because everybody's going to come here with what they know. And it's about taking that way. The SAS have something called hearts and minds. It's like when you go into a place, you take the hearts and minds. And its origin, and I'm just going to be controversial and say, well, everything in the world that ever was of any worth came from the Sufis, comes from something that Rumi said when he goes, the Sufi never fails because the Sufi takes hearts. Because when you take that heart, you've taken them completely. So what I'm here to do is to be a thief in the truest sense of the word, which is to take away all of the things that you don't need. If I take away the things you don't need, what are you left with? You're left with yourself. But then that implies that there's a methodology here, that I could do something to help you wake up or something. I might, or I may possibly not as well. Because I remember many, many years ago, I was going through a very non-dual phase. I'm sitting there with this guy and I went, there's nothing happening, it's just this. And he looked at me, looked at everybody else, he goes, He thinks there's nothing happening. And it's about sometimes going from that expansiveness into the nitty-gritty and seeing that the expansiveness and the nitty-gritty is actually one. And there's all this color going on. So with me, I'm going through a phase now, it's all about humanity now. It's all about, come on, let's just talk, let's be friends, okay, if you're going to cry, I mean, it's authentic, then I'm going to meet you in that authenticity. I'm probably going to go silent. If you're going to bring it as a story, I probably won't listen. I probably would just go off on something else or something. And if I really can't be bothered, say that's not your question. Because sometimes people will even ask you a question, it's not their question. So it's about chopping away until we get to the actual heart of the matter. You know, who are you and what do you want? Why are you here?